Right. Now jumping up might feel friendly until somebody gets hurt. Now that might be all fun and games and we can have a good laugh at my expense. I'm the first person to do so, but the reality is, if that was a child or an elderly person, that could be extremely dangerous, and it absolutely does lead to dogs like Chance ending up in rescue centres. So we have to ensure that we get on top of that as quickly as possible. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I was able to do so and give Chance the best chance at a loving forever home. Now, usually when I'm working on jumping behaviours with dogs, I follow a process of teaching the behaviour that I do want first, using lots of food reinforcement-based work. Usually that's a sit and a heel command. Then once I've done that, I then address the problem behaviour of jumping, and I use my behaviour highway system that I'm going to talk about later in this video, because it's really, really important, of interrupting and challenging the bad behaviour, but then redirecting to that desirable behaviour we've already taught. However, there are certain times where I have to break my own rules. When there are dogs displaying behaviours as severe as my mate here was when he first came, it was impossible for me to teach him the desirable behaviour. Doing any kind of food work was impossible with just how bad that jumping had come. Now, when I work with any dog with behaviour problems, I always do risk assessments as part of the diagnosis process. And for his problem behaviours, especially around jumping, the likelihood of the behaviour was a 3 out of 3. The severity of the behaviour was a 2, maybe a 3 out of 3 in terms of how bad things are when it actually happens. Now, he's had me on my arse, he's hurt me a couple of times with his jumping, and I'm a 6'2", big, fairly strong guy. If that was a child, if it was an elderly person, if it was a much smaller person, then it definitely would be a 3 and a 3, which puts him right in the highest risk category. Which means that paired with my inability to do any of the positive reinforcement styles of training first, meant that we had to jump straight to dealing with the problem behaviour. And because I was very confident that he would die in a rescue centre if I didn't get that behaviour fixed and fixed quickly, it meant that we had to jump to more extreme behaviour modification plans than I normally would with smaller breeds or dogs with less severity or less seriousness when they are displaying problem behaviours, but we'll show you all of that later in this video. Now, before I can show you the practical demonstration of exactly what you need to do, we have to understand what I refer to as my behaviour highway system. When it comes to your dog's problem jumping behaviour, what happens is your dog's just going through life and then a trigger emerges. That might be a guest, that might be them meeting somebody out in public, it might be you coming home. And what that does is it creates an emotional and motivational state in your dog. We don't really need to worry about that at this stage, but what it does is that emotional and motivational cocktail means that your dog then has behaviour pathway options at their disposal. And when it comes to jumping, we're going to look at it simply through 2 behaviour pathways. The first pathway is them jumping up. That's the path that we don't want them to go down. So they've been going through life, they see the trigger, emotions, motivations occur, and now they go this way and they're jumping up, problem behaviour. What we want is for them to experience that trigger. That might be you coming home, it might be meeting a guest, and they go down this behaviour pathway instead, which is sit nicely with good manners. Now, like I just discussed, the ideal way to train dogs through behaviours like this is to make the ideal pathway as rewarding as humanly possible, even trying to make it more rewarding than the jumping up behaviour in the first place. And then sometimes, it's fairly rare to be honest, but sometimes that fixes the problem for us and we can just stay in purely positive reinforcement land. However, with most dogs, what you can do is make this behaviour pathway as rewarding as possible, but the dog will sometimes, or maybe all the time, still jump. So we have to close that behaviour pathway off. We have to barricade it and make it clear you don't ever go down here. But when we do that, it's really easy to redirect them to this other pathway that we've been working on loads. They know it really well. They know there's lots of reward and reinforcement. With the severity of this case, we haven't been able to do that. We've had to close off this behaviour pathway first. Yes, this is an extreme behaviour with a very, very strong, powerful dog with deeply ingrained habitual jumping behaviours, which absolutely is going to result in this dog dying in a shelter if I don't get on top of it quickly. So I have to go to more extreme measures to be able to close off this behaviour highway. It's important for you to understand as we go through this video that this is fairly rare when it comes to jumping. This is definitely the more extreme side of the equation, but I'm going to be completely open and honest with you and take you through that process. The reality is, in my experience, is that most dogs with problem jumping behaviors, you can spend a couple of days really working on this desirable pathway of reinforcing a nice heel, a nice sit, all four on the floor always leads to rewards and praise, basic concepts. Then when it comes to shutting down the bad behavior pathway, it can be a verbal challenge, usually with very, very small little bits of lead communication pressure. That wasn't the case with my mate. It did require more extreme methods, but again, due to the extremely high risk assessment nature and the likelihood of this behavior meaning that this dog will either spend the rest of its life in a shelter or have to be euthanized if it goes to a different shelter that does euthanize for behavior problems, it has to be addressed. And I am willing to step up from a place of loving leadership to communicate you can't ever go down that behavior pathway ever again. Once I've closed that behavior pathway, now I can focus on positive reinforcement training to teach you what it is that I do want instead. Now, I'm about to show you how I actually closed that behavior pathway with my mate here, and I'm going to pre-warn you, it's quite serious behavior modification that I'm about to show you, but I think it's really important that you guys get to see what that looks like with extreme cases like with my mate here. Now, before I show you that though, guys, it's really important that you know that for any behavior modification, any extreme behavior modification, it's really important that you have a thorough plan. Now, I've been doing this for years. I've got a lot of experience working with extreme dogs and extreme cases just like this. And if you want to become a higher level canine leader that has all of the skill, knowledge, and step-by-step guides for fixing any behavior problem you could imagine, as well as teaching all of the obedience that you need to teach all of your dogs, then you need to check out my Perfect Canine Companion course. It includes things like my No More Pulling Masterclass, my reactivity rehab, my recall reset, my crate training, my Leadership is Love course. All of my courses are included in that Perfect Canine Companion course. And to thank you guys for supporting the channel, we've got a special discount. And what's best is the way that I'm able to run my sanctuary free of charge, work with dogs like my mate here free of charge, work with his future forever home owners completely free of charge, is because we run all the profits from those courses to be able to run my sanctuary to help keep dogs like this out of shelters and give them the second chance that they deserve. So again, there'll be a link in the description box below for that. But let's move into how I actually stopped my mate here from jumping, which is then going to allow us to help him become the perfect canine companion that I've always known was in here. Enough. And that probably will be the last time he ever jumps. Like I say, it wouldn't surprise me if when you do a process like this, the only slight concern is that they associate any interaction with you as being the problem. But what he needs to learn is, again, this is now kind of the behavior highway principle. When you sit down and you're calm and quiet, this is how you get treats, this is how you get fuss. And if you ever jump up somebody ever again, it's going to get communicated to you that swiftly. If I get a sit, then you're always going to get a treat now moving forward, just as we work through this kind of jumping situation. Now, and this is, so when we were trying the food-based training earlier, where I just wanted to condition his markers, start to work on some luring-based behaviors, there's absolutely no way that I could do that with him doing those behaviors. It was preventing our ability to be able to actually do nice positive reinforcement training. Now I'm at a point where, because of what I've done with him there, I've just made it really clear, don't ever do that again. That's completely inappropriate. Now I can actually start the food-based training process. Again, given the choice, it's always nice to be able to do a lot of the positive stuff early. But when you get cases like this, sometimes you have to kind of break the rule. Now look at the difference I'm getting already. Literally one rep of a correction delivered swiftly, firmly, not from a place of anger or frustration, just with impeccable timing, made it really clear to him. There was no middle ground there. It was, you jump up and that happened. Learning has occurred. Don't ever do that again. And then the reality is, guys, that the next step is just practice, practice, practice. And you're going to know your dog better than anybody else. And you're going to understand which areas, aspects, environments, type of people are going to be more of a challenge to your dog and which of those things are going to be less of a challenge. So start with the easier wins. Practice, practice, practice. Close off bad decisions, redirect around the good decisions, reward and praise heavily when they make those good decisions, and build up over time, and you'll be left with a dog that understands that when it meets anybody new, it keeps all four paws on the floor, it sits and waits calmly with good manners, because that's how it gets what it wants. It doesn't have to be a big deal, doesn't have to be a big drama. It can be done in such a way that facilitates a wonderful relationship between you and your dog. So again, remember, if you want more information, there will be a link in the description box below that you can go and check that out right now. Thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to see you on the next video.